Hi there, welcome to the District Manager Presents, which is where I get to show some colleagues or other individuals I think have something to share that you might find interesting. And at the moment, you may have realised on this blog we've shared quite a lot from The King's Speech, the wonderful movie that has featured Colin Firth and Geoffrey and that is doing so well in box offices around the world because it is a feel-good movie that really does feel good. Well, I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it if you've seen it. But one of the key aspects of it, which has been of interest on this particular blog, is the fact that Lionel Logue was a Christian Scientist for some period and certainly seems to have brought a sense of compassion and love and healing to his work, which may be to some great degree attributable to Christian Science. One of the things that Christian Science has helped many people with is speech defects. And one of the wonderful things about Christian Science is it takes us beyond just managing that kind of a problem to actually healing it. In those cases where Christian Science has helped, I have spoken to many people now who have had that experience of getting totally beyond the problem in a way that I think most people would love to feel that could be the case. Well, it can be the case, and here are a couple more instances on this interview that show two people who have in fact experienced exactly that they had speech defects when they were young. One had an instantaneous healing of that defect while still young. The other grew into young adulthood and was still troubled by the speech problem until finally it did leave him forever through his prayers and his understanding of the fact that God is love. Well, both these people have their stories to share. Let's listen in.
Hi, George.
Hello, Judy. Tell me about your experience. You've had a healing of stuttering or stammering, haven't you?
Yes. But you know, it was funny because I forgot all about it until this film, the King's Speech, came out. And then I sort of remembered. I remember as a young child being painfully shy. I remember I could not get through a sentence and I lisped. I couldn't say R's, I know that, because I used to wobbit and things. And I can't remember the other letters I couldn't say. And I had a cousin who used to tease me mercilessly. And it was very distressing. What about you?
Well, I stuttered a little when I was very young, but it only really came to a head when I went to secondary school. And the crunch was reading out in class. And I knew that there were certain words or certain combinations of letters that I couldn't say. But deep down I knew I was a pretty good reader, so what would happen? I would look down several lines and see one of these words coming out. By the time I got there, I was in an absolute panic, and I just couldn't say the word. So that was quite embarrassing, because I'd been reading quite well, and suddenly there'd be silence. And I had one or two techniques which I used, one of which was to pretend that I'd lost my place. Sometimes that meant I could get out of it because they'd ask somebody else in the class. But other times the pause just allowed me to burst it out, because I found that if I actually held my breath, so that was a way of managing it. But there was no professional advice at that time for stammerers and stutterers, were there?
Not that I remember.
How did your healing come about, though?
Well, I grew up going to a Christian Science Sunday school, and I had been healed of all sorts of things, but I don't think it ever occurred. My mother was a Christian Scientist. I don't think it ever occurred to her, but something must have happened, and I can't remember what, but I remember her coming to her. Now, I was terribly shy, and I remember her saying to me one day that self-consciousness was being conscious of self and not loving others. Right. And I'd always thought of myself as being a very loving person, and I was really quite shocked at that. And I went away and I really thought about it. I can't remember all the details. All I know was that from that moment that she said that, that was the end of all the stuttering and the lisp as well. It wasn't the end of the shyness, but it was the end of the speech defect. And
just stopped overnight?
Just stopped. Well, I think it stopped, as she said it, probably not even overnight. It was an instant healing.
It's interesting, you were saying you couldn't remember. I had to really think back hard about what happened and when, because it's now such a distant memory for me, because I've been doing so many things since then which have put me a bit on the public stage, so it quickly disappeared. In my case, what happened was I started to go to a Christian Science Sunday school when I was about 10, which is when my mother became interested in Christian Science. And looking back, I think it was that I was getting a different picture of myself. I think probably my own esteem of how I saw myself was improving. And I then went to university, and there was a Christian Science group within the university, and we used to get together and share healings. And I remember to start with, there was no way I was going to stand up and speak, because that was not on. But then one day I discovered I managed to get through without a stutter or a stammer. And then there was one defining moment when a local church, asked for somebody to go and speak to them about what we were doing within this Christian Science College organisation. And after the event, it must have lasted about an hour, I discovered that I'd really enjoyed this. And there'd been not a stammer or a stutter in sight.
That's great.
And so it was a very gradual, I can't say it happened overnight like yours, but it went, and it has never returned.
That's wonderful.
And since then, I don't know, how has your life since been? You've no return of the problem?
None at all, no. And I've done lots of public speaking. In fact, I worked with British Airways, and I was having, to do PAs. And I remember one day on a flight, I was called, and they said, a man in first class wants to talk to you. And I thought, what's all that about? And I went up there, and he said that he was a speech coach, not therapist, a speech coach. And he said, I want you to know that yours are the best PAs I've ever heard on an aircraft. He said, you almost made the safety demonstration sound interesting. And I thought that was lovely, that it was sort of like...
Confirmation.
It was confirmation, yeah it was great.
I had a similar sort of thing happen to me, because when I mentioned it, I really only thought of it again recently, perhaps as a result of all the publicity with the film. And I told somebody, and actually gave a testimony in our own church about it, and they just couldn't believe it, because they know that over the years I'd been on television, I'd been on the radio, I got a job with as group training manager of a major international construction group, and I was on my feet every day. And I actually gave training courses in presentation skills. So it was a complete reversal of the earlier problem. But it's lovely, isn't it, when those things just disappear into the past. You can put it behind you and you don't have to think about it again.
Well, thank you to Judy from Berkshire and George from Bedfordshire for sharing their stories in that way. Both Judy and George, like myself, are Christian Science Committees on Publication. That means we're here to help anyone who's interested understand what Christian Science is and what it isn't. So if you have any further questions, please do email me at londoncs@csps.com. That's LONDONCS@csps.com. Or if you have found this video via YouTube, please have a look at our blog at christiansciencecommsuk.wordpress.com. That's christiansciencecommsuk.wordpress.com. Thanks for checking in.